Okay, we're recording now.
We are.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea of how much we've got? We can just put a new SD card in and make
How long
it.
did you record for yesterday?
It's like an hour-ish, hour and a half.
64
So,
gigs?
yeah,
Oh, you're fine then.
we're good? Good for a while. Okay.
I'll watch it. I'll see the record later.
Okay, beautiful. All right. This is a Neurolite training, and it's 2 days. Today is February 11th, 2017. For the records, we're in Larry Payne's original Samatha Yoga Center, which for most people is the beginning of an entirely new aspect of their life. Larry has kindly allowed us to use it. So, Larry, my brother, thank you. This is the basic game plan, and then we'll see the way the game goes. I'm going to do a bit of an introduction, kind of a science introduction. It's not going to be too deep, not going to be too long, but I think there are a couple of things that we need to kind of reflect upon to put things into context. So we'll call it kind of the theory introduction. After that, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the Neurolite in 3 steps because there are 3 fundamental components. The first thing we're going to do is talk about brain food. Second thing will be about brain gym. I think the intro, brain food, and brain gym is probably going to fill up today. What I'm hoping is, depending on the flow and the questions and how much talk comes out of me, we may do at least, I'll say a couple, some, I don't know, sessions so that we can mix in practicality for those of you that lack practical experience or need some kind of practical insight into the yakety yak, talk, and questions. So that's today. Intro, brain food, brain gym, and hopefully in some fashion moving at least a few of you into experiences. For example, here James, who is a dear friend and peer and co-teacher and everything from a long time ago, you've not had any chance with this animal yet, have you? Did we do that? Did you have any?
We did a 15-minute.
We did a 15-minute. We did. At Dragon Herbs. Okay, I forgot about that. But as an example, some of you may need some kind of reinforced experience. I think, like Bob, right? Like, what the hell is it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's today. That's the game plan. Intro, brain food, brain gym, and in some fashion a few experiences, not so that they enjoy and we sit with our thumb in our ear, but then we can discuss elements and aspects of somebody's practical experience in theory. So it's a nice way to move in and out of it. Tomorrow, the plan is brain skills, and after brain skills, the concept of creating game plans, session plans, like, if I want to do this, what's it like? Or can I do this in 2 or 3 sessions? Or how often do they come? All those kinds of things to weave it together. So we'll imagine tomorrow is roughly in 2 parts. The first part will be exploring the category of brain skills. There are 80 sessions there. And then the second part of the day will how to make this practical. What's it like to really use it? That as a light coach or as a complement to my massage therapy and aromatherapy, or I work in a chiropractic setting or I'm a medical doctor, whatever. So that's the plan for these 2 days. If you can be here for all of it, I think that's good. If you can be here for part of it, get what you get. We'll do our best to keep it on record. As soon as I can get back to Thailand and work with my guys, we'll put it in the website. So you get to see the parts that you missed. That's the theory. Okay? All right. Before I start with the first, again, any question, any kind of itch you want me to scratch a little bit before we get going? Yes?
I think we should tilt that up a bit.
You think that should be tilted up a little bit?
What's that, the camera?
Yeah.
The camera?
If what I'm seeing on the...
Are you seeing like my beard and nothing else?
No, I think
It's a nice beard.
last thought Debbie had it really good.
Okay.
It's just up a little.
It's framed this way, and you got about this much space above you.
Listen, if it looks good to you, I'm good. Sonia, if you want to change it, change it.
I mean, you want a wider shot versus a zoomed in? Or?
It's okay. As long as it looks Okay. You know. Okay. I like this subject a lot. I really like it a lot. Okay. Okay, that'll, you can see that, but that doesn't change the angle.
I wanted to see it.
Thank you. Okay. The question is, what is the subject that I like a lot? And it may sound strange, but it only seems like there's only one subject. That's either a good thing or a bad thing. Everything just seems to be like the same subject to me. You know, whether it's aromatherapy, neuroplasticity, meditation, GPS, I don't know. It just seems like there are so many unifying principles that just manifest differently. And, you know, if you've hung around me enough, you know, sometimes I like to use analogies. Analogies are shortcuts because you'd identify a principle, and in this other situation, but you don't understand the circumstance. So another expression as an analogy lets you understand that and say, oh, you mean it's like that. So I tend to use a lot of analogies. If that works for you, fine. If it doesn't work, then ask me to explain more directly. Okay. Little bit about why the Neurolite is the way it is. Okay? Why it is the way it is. That's a fair question. You know, why did you design it like that? And one of the areas that fascinates me is the study of complex adaptive systems. It permeates our cultures now. Basically, what is a complex adaptive system? Any entity that has so many parts and pieces that actually it's an unknown number. Like, how many trees are there in the rainforest? Right? How many air currents are there on the planet? How many brain cells and synapses are there in the brain? Nobody knows the number. You try to, you know, I think some of you have heard, there's this is what I remember. It seems absurd, and I don't even know what it means, but they say that if you take 1 cubic millimeter of brain tissue, a cubic millimeter, you know, that's getting down small in my world. They estimate about 1 billion synapses in that cubic millimeter of brain tissue. I have no idea what that means. It just means it's incredible. I mean, incredible, meaning unbelievable. I guess the problem is that we're so human-centric that we measure everything by the size of our body. Like, why is a mouse small and an elephant big? Well, because of the size of our body. You know, so to work with complex adaptive systems, you just kind of let it flap in the wind for a while. So the brain is a complex adaptive system. That means it has more parts and pieces, more synapses, more nerves than anybody knows. And the other big point is that all of these parts and pieces, these innumerable factors, all interrelate to each other. They're all responsive to each other. That complex adaptive systems are called self-organizing. They have no boss. The brain, even though there's this hippocampus, you know, the brain doesn't have a brain. You know, the rainforest doesn't have a boss that runs the rainforest. So one thing about a complex adaptive system is it knows how to do what it does. It's a complex adaptive system. That's the brain. That's the, you know, oh, the brain is a computer, oh, the brain is a clockwork. You know, it's always dependent on the relative science, what metaphor we use. Now we say it's a complex adaptive system. Okay. It's self-organizing, but there are two buts. And you got to get this to understand. This is really critical. Critical is the concept, and also critical to know about why the Neurolite is the way it is, and critical in using the Neurolite. So I'll say now the brain, which is a complex adaptive system. Actually, the organism as a whole is a complex adaptive system. By cutting it into pieces, it just makes it easier as a concept, but it's all one thing. Your brain is not separate from your body. Your body is your brain is your body. Number one, the complex adaptive system knows how to self-organize efficiently. That's why we're sitting here live right now, by the way. if it has enough energy. That is, if you know about dissipative structures and so on, that they really became, those that study, that it has to have enough energy. That complex adaptive processes require a constant flow of adequate energy to match demand. And a lot of neuroscience right now, the molecular folks are dragging their feet, but those in neuroscience that are working with biophysics are saying, there are a lot of problems that evolve into pathologies that seem to begin by simply being energy deficient. And I'm not talking about cosmic, mystical energy, whatever that is or isn't, not the point. I'm talking about mitochondrial ATP, the stuff that every cell uses to do what it does. A muscle cell contracts. To do that job, it needs ATP. A nerve cell conducts signals. It uses ATP to conduct signals. Mucosal cell secretes. It needs ATP to secrete. So any cell that does something is fueled by this process generated by immigrant workers. I don't know if they're documented. They have their own DNA. They live in all the cells. Nobody knows when they became symbiotic, but they create the ATP. A complex adaptive system will efficiently self-organize, meaning, what does self-organize mean? Continually learn and adapt successfully. Because it wants to survive. This peculiar, interesting, amazing thing called survival, that subject is worth 2 days right there. Just the word survive. What does survive mean? But a complex adaptive system will self-organize to maintain survival by constantly learning and shifting and adapting and problem solving. And a lot of it short-term, by the way, if it has enough energy. I'm about 185 pounds, give or take. I produce about 185 pounds of ATP every day. And so do you. Whatever your body weight is, roughly that's how much is produced. Now, it degrades extremely rapidly. That's why I'm not 360 pounds at the end of the day. But, for those of you trained in Oriental medicine, the issue of qi, qi has to flow. You can't store qi. It's not something you can bank up and use whenever you want. There are some short-term mechanisms that can kind of, hold it in place for a while. But like gu qi, food qi, we have to keep on eating, and breath qi. That qi is this activity. It's not an object. We can't reify it. And that's the whole point about a complex adaptive system is it'll work just fine if it has a constant flow. You can't make all your ATP at one time and say, well, here it is for the next day. We make it on demand. And wherever the metabolism is in high demand, that's where it goes into high action. So if you want a complex adaptive system, aka your brain, to continually self-organize efficiently, problem solve, you've got to make sure that it has an adequate supply of energy. And in physiological terms, that means sufficient ATP on demand. Number two, because there are two buts. One is the complex adaptive system self-organizes efficiently if it has enough energy on demand. Number two, if you have sufficient connectivity, if the networking is integrated, the connections, because that's how the information and the energy moves around. That you have to have connectivity. Connections. And this is not only synaptic messaging, but actually hardwire nerves. Do any of you recall being taught or even told that we only use 10% of our brain? Right? This is stupid stuff. That's totally incorrect. And the other thing is that the brain plateaus at maturity and then it only degrades, it'll never change. When you lose your brain cells, they're gone forever, all that stuff. Totally wrong. So, complex adaptive system, three things: self-organizing, needs energy on demand, must have connectivity. These are the three things. That's why the Neuralite has brain gym, brain food, brain skills. That's why. I try, and maybe it's like a logo or something, but I try to design by nature. Look at how nature does it, and then work with technology that's what I call biophilic, not biophobic. Bio is life, right? Phobia is fear or aversion. Philia, love. Technology that loves nature. It's biophilic technology. So this is biophilic technology, that it's based on the principles that nature uses and tries to express them and use them in the same way that nature does. So the complex adaptive system, the self-organization part, that's the category called brain skills. That's the learning part. The energy requirement, the brain food, that's the light thing into the bloodstream that we use the nasal passage to access. That's old technology. In the beginning, I tried to integrate the brain food into that engineered thing back there, which is great for producing sound signals and light signals. It was a giant mistake. It would have destroyed everything because we had to re-engineer the whole thing. And then the other thing became obvious. Well, then the only way you could do brain food was to have that thing turned on, and it's a big thing, relatively speaking. So the decision was to go with a third party. Can you get that for me? Because the little white thing. Unplug it from the power. Okay. Yeah, bring that. That's good. Perfect. Thank you much. Okay, so the decision was to go with a third-party device. These are made in China. China makes a lot of different models. There are different countries starting to make them now. The technology is old. It's been in use for more than 20 years. I personally have used these for more than 15 years. So the decision was, well, hey, to upregulate ATP to match demand, which is especially important when we break down brain food in a moment, this turns out to be fantastic. It's portable, it's got great design, it's durable, it's rechargeable, the whole thing. So, in the complex adaptive system, your brain, self-organization, learning, that's the brain skills. The brain food is this thing, and there may be other versions later on like transcranial, but this works so well and it's inexpensive, and why make it complicated when simple works? So this is what, when you get a Neuralite starting January the 1st, if you got it before you can get this separately. When you buy it, this comes with it, right? There's no extra cost, that's in the cost. Then the brain gym is for the connectivity. If the system lacks connectivity, like if you don't have a Wi-Fi signal, everything's there, but you don't have the connections. There's no transfer of information and energy. So, in realizing that, I developed the brain gym, because the brain gym works at fundamental signaling exercises of the brain to make sure certain signal sets work well, that you have the integrity in the network. Because otherwise, trying to do the brain skills, the probability of success and integration is going to be very poor. So, I'm not going to go any further with that, but I want you to know that the reason why it has 3 elements, and to be clear, one of the 3 is a separate device. The brain food is this thing. The brain gym and the brain skills are in the flashy light sound thing. Right, they're both there, and I'll show you on the user interface in case you've not seen it. When you open it up with the user interface with your smartphone or tablet or computer, you're going to see you have choices: brain skills, brain gym. You say, well, where's the brain food? It's because it's not integrated into that unit. It's a separate unit, but conceptually they 3 work together. The design from day one always had those 3 because that's what it's like in nature. Self-organization with adequate energy and adequate connectivity. 1, 2, 3. Fair enough? Any questions at all about that? Because to me, the self-organization, if you've seen, swarms of bees or schools of fish or, this extraordinary thing where there's no boss and everything is happening, it's like that inside the brain. So that's why there are three, because of those three elements. The next topic, neuroplasticity. So, this is like about a half an hour of some of this introduction stuff, right? Neuroplasticity. If there's anything that I want, and I say this every time, if there's any one thing that I want you to get from this interaction, it's the tremendous significance of neuroplasticity in our life. That's what I hope. If you don't have a real excited and heightened interest in neuroplasticity, the Neurolite isn't going to be that interesting. I mean, the whole subject is not that interesting because, okay, what is it? If nothing else, it's kind of interesting entertainment or something like that. Until you realize what neuroplasticity is all about, and in that case, all of a sudden it becomes incredibly important. Okay, neuroplasticity. Let me ask you, this is not a test, it's just having fun. What's your take, in simple language? What's neuroplasticity? Why is that news, and what's the big deal? Come on, here I am, I'm embarrassing myself, I'm talking all the time, all right? Talk a little bit, what is it? There's no wrong answer. This is the safest place in the world, I was saying earlier, right? This is the only place in the world where it's okay to not know. That's what it means to learn. So if you don't know what it is, I'm happy to share that with you. So come on, let's have some fun a little bit. Let's do this together. What's neuroplasticity? Yeah?
It's the ability to change your brain.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. It's the ability to change your brain. Does it happen sometimes and not happen other times? Neuroplasticity.
Well, it depends on the pattern you have, the thinking pattern. So you can, when you go into a kind of a hamster wheel, you're actually reinforcing those neurons. So you're creating.
Yeah.
So it's by
Yeah.
changing certain patterns and
Yeah.
signaling the brain.
Yeah. To me, learning is best and most fun when it's shared. Right now, even the way this room is set up, I didn't have much choice. It's much better if we were all looking at each other almost, instead of you looking at me and the video camera at me. Like the idea that I know and you don't, that's not the way it works. You know tons. And for us to kind of share what we know, and then I can clarify and point. Admittedly, I know some things that probably are important to talk about, but I'm going to do this. I'm real tired of teaching. I got tired of teaching a long time ago. I'm a lot more interested in sharing learning. So let's have a little bit of fun. James, I don't know you from a bunch. You're a bright guy. What's neuroplasticity? In your own words, what do you think that is?
I'm not sure that I put those words to it, but
Sure.
I recognize the experience working with clients.
Yeah.
In the last,
He's an excellent body worker, premier body worker, as some of you know. Yeah.
In the last 5 to 6 years in my own practice,
Mhm.
I've realized that what I used to think I was doing in terms of tissue release had next to nothing to do with the true potential of my clients being able that my clients, if they had other access, they could reach their goals with what the rest of the world would consider to be the mind.
Mm-hmm.
That more of it was going on up here, and yet my training to reach those levels of their mind that they couldn't reach with linear language-based partial thinking in the brain, my training to reach those lower levels of mind were through the body, and that something was going on by touching their body. I was making changes in processes. I assume that's what you're talking about with neuroplasticity.
Yeah, as I said earlier, it's all one subject. Part of what makes this good for us in this day or two, if you're here, is to recognize that there are certain things that you believe that will make it harder to take advantage of neuroplasticity. That there are certain ideas that we have that are wrong. And the first one is to even think that the brain is separate from the body. The brain is the body is the brain. Whenever you work, touch, do anything with what you call your body or what you call your mind, it engages the brain. So, you know, for those of you in Oriental medicine or in different concepts of psychophysiology, I say minimally there's a triune brain. I call it the cranial brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain. And they're all fluidly interactive all the time. We only separate them because we're reductionists. We like to cut things into parts and pieces and then figure out how they connect. Well, there really isn't any issue about connection because they're not separate. Right? They're not separate. And even the concept that, you know, there's this body and there's this brain, you know, you got to loosen up on that because, yeah, that's neuroplasticity. The whole organism, come on in, Liz. She drove a long ways. Liz, I don't know if we have any more chairs, but there's this big green thing you can lay on.
Okay, that's fine.
Come on over. All right. So part of what I'm going to talk about now, be careful that you don't have some concepts that are so firmly entrenched that you have to kind of weave the idea around your idea. Maybe just loosen up on the idea. See, neuroplasticity is always happening. Neuroplasticity is neutral. The organism assumes that whatever you keep doing is what you want to do, and it's going to make it easier to do it the next time. It's called a habit. It's called a habit. So, neuroplasticity is the way to get out of trouble and into trouble. You can't not be neuroplastic. It's like you're in a car and it's moving and you have no choice. You can't stop it. You might as well steer it. You know, we're most neuroplastic? No, something like that. We're most plastic, neuroplastic. We're most neuroplastic right from embryonic growth up to about 25 years old. The brain matures, finally stops its thing about 25. Of course, it's jam-packed with potential in the earliest years. It'll level off around 25 to around 40, and if you don't do anything about it positive, it'll slip and slide, down we go. So the fact is that right now, what you're doing with any degree of attention is teaching your brain how to behave. It's not only teaching it how to behave, it's teaching it how to grow. Parts of your brain are getting bigger, physically bigger. Parts of your brain are getting physically smaller. Don't use it, you lose it. It's true. And now the new bumper sticker, fire it to wire it. Every time that you fire a process, you're actually wiring your brain to behave in that way. So it's not as though neuroscience has discovered this new phenomena that is just beginning. It is the fundamental basis of how the brain functions. It's always in a malleable state. It's always, famous studies not only, reference them indirectly, but, in London you have to go through an excruciating training period to be a cab driver there. It takes many years, you have to memorize all these things. The tests are famous. And so they do MRI studies on London cab drivers compared to other similar people, and they find sections of their brain significantly enlarged in relation to their training. It's not only that, your bicep will get bigger if you exercise it. Actual areas of your brain will lay down new nerves called neurogenesis. So, neuroplasticity, you can't get away from it. So, what are you going to do about that? The one, and I mentioned this last night for those of you that were there, and I mention this all the time because this is really important. In order to engage neuroplastic change, positive or negative, I mean, even how you define positive or negative is kind of a tricky one. All right? Some short-term survival techniques are very positive, but they suck negatively as long-term behaviors. And that's part of the trick, is when you engage a short-term reaction, is it appropriate to keep signaling that same reaction long-term or not? Sometimes, no, 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 no. Some of the worst problems we have is a prolonged expression of a short-term survival technique. You get really angry and you shout back and, you flush it out, and that's appropriate. You had that, or you cry. Let's not make it, don't be angry. Let's say you cry. Okay, you're sad. But that's a short-term response. It's quite appropriate by circumstance, whatever that is. But now, to keep returning to that as a long-term mechanism of adaptation, it ends up being a mistake. So neuroplasticity is a clever beast, very responsive. Basically, whatever you're doing again and again, the brain accepts that that's what you want, and it'll make it easier the next time. See, I see this, call it neuroplasticity, maybe it needs a better term, but I really do see it as something more like natural living or ecology. It's a lifestyle to me. It's a philosophy that you can apply as a lifestyle, that the way you do what you do through movement, through mental, and through your senses is actually shaping your brain to be the way it is. And the point that I was making that I left, the only time that the brain will respond is when the experience that you're having draws your attention. The experience has to have that flavor of being special, or unique, or significant. You have to notice it. That's why this whole current theme of mindfulness is so intriguing. It's so intriguing because it's based on the principle, not the glorious one that we prided ourselves in for a long while, of multitasking. It's all about